My gingerbread house this year is really late. I finished on December 30th and ruined Christmas for everyone. But did you know that there are actually 12 days of Christmas? You may have heard the song. The 12th night of Christmas is mathematically on the 5th of January, but some places celebrate Old Twelfth Night, or Old Twelvey, which lands on the 17th because of something about the Julian calendar. Speaking of Christian traditions, my gingerbread house this year is a medieval abbey run by crooked monks who are selling the forgiveness of sins during the start of the Protestant Reformation in 16th century Germany. It's gonna have a tall bell tower, large glass windows, a monk selling forgiveness, and another monk falling from the bell tower after getting stabbed. I'll explain everything later. I designed the abbey in a 3D app called Fusion to prepare the cutting instructions for my routing machine that you'll see in a bit. I measured and cut out cardboard rectangles to use as templates for each piece of gingerbread. Using an edible food marker, I wrote identification numbers behind each rectangle because otherwise they'd all look the same. I lubricated the rods of my routing machine with lithium grease to prevent jamming while cutting. I'm trying out a new clamping system this year to hold my pieces down. In the old system, the clamps would slot in from the side like so, and take up a lot of horizontal space that could be used for larger pieces. I drilled holes in the front and back of my board so that the clamps could be secured from each end of a piece instead of the sides. The new clamp system seemed to work well and allowed me to cut much closer to the edges than before. It was a pain to unscrew and move the clamps for every piece of a different size, so I opted to drill slots that could allow me to easily slide the clamps forward and back. I don't think a drill was the best tool for this. Things were going well, but while cutting one of the window pieces, the machine went too close to the edge and collided with the clamp, shredding shards of metal all over the place. This caused some concern about my new clamping system. I cleaned up as much metal as I could, but some of it became embedded into the cookie and impossible to remove. I wouldn't eat this cookie unless you were iron deficient or something. The front piece was the most complicated piece to cut. My original design had thin vertical window bars which proved to be very fragile while cutting. I tried to secure them with blocks of rubber, but they broke anyway. I made a painful decision to remove the bars. Things were going well until the machine went too close to the edge and collided with another clamp. It was clear that my system was severely flawed, but I continued to do nothing about it. A common roofing technique in medieval Germany was using roof tiles shaped like beaver tails. The Germans called this Biberschwanz, which means beaver tails. The second floor of my abbey uses a common building technique in Germany called half-timbering. A half-timbered structure has exposed wooden frames with its gaps filled in with stone, brick, or other materials. I made the half-timbered frames as separate, darker pieces to be fitted inside precisely cut slots in the walls. Unfortunately, the frames didn't fit in the slots I made for some reason, so I had to file them down until they did. I filled in the windows with isomalt that I heated up in the microwave. I assembled the abbey using melted isomalt to glue the pieces together. Unfortunately, the scalding isomalt shattered my measuring cup in the microwave, causing it to spill everywhere, rendering my microwave unusable until I cleaned it out with boiling hot water. Christmas is a time of joy and cheer and holding it together because in the end, it'll be worth it. I used chocolate royal icing to fill in the gaps between my pieces. I smeared some chocolate icing on the ground to add some texture. I made my first monk using aluminum wire wrapped in floral tape. The tape helps to make the fondant stick better. These monks have black robes because they're Benedictine monks and that's what they wear. Franciscan monks, on the other hand, wear brown robes. These monks have a haircut called a tonsure, where they shave only the tops of their heads. For the eyes, I used white sprinkle balls. I had some difficulty grabbing them. I used an edible marker for the pupils. I made cheese, a wine barrel, a customer, and a bell out of fondant. This monk is selling the cheese and wine to the customer, along with an indulgence. Indulgences were something you could receive in exchange for a donation to reduce the punishment for your sins, and often came in the form of a letter with a red wax seal. I made my letters of indulgence using wafer paper and red fondant. You may already know that people like this guy, Johann Tetzel, were known for profiting off of the sale of indulgences, which made people like this guy, Martin Luther, really angry, and it prompted Luther to write this document, the 95 Theses. The 95 Theses were a list of complaints he had with the church that started the Protestant Reformation. Legend has it that he nailed this document to the door of a church in Wittenberg, Germany. I made my 95 Theses using wafer paper and an edible marker. I discarded my first draft because I didn't like how I wrote the number 9 or the number 5. The monk falling out of the tower to his death is the abbot, the person in charge of the abbey and the one profiting from the sale of indulgences. The abbot is holding a staff called a crozier, and the top spiral of the crozier is called the crook. You can easily tell that this is a crooked abbot because the crook of his crozier is pointing outwards, when it was ordained that an abbot must hold his crozier with the crook pointing inwards to indicate that his jurisdiction was limited to his own house. The person in the tower is holding a sword and stabbed the abbot for scamming the townspeople. I added the bell to the bell tower. I added the monk and the customer. I added Aristotle's second book of Poetics. This is a book about comedy that's never been found, and it's a core plot point in the novel The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, where it's a forbidden book that monks are dying to read. Literally. Finally, I added snow using icing sugar and an air pump. My gingerbread house this year is called The Monkey Business, an abbey run by crooked monks who are selling indulgences and scamming the townspeople. It has a tall bell tower with a crazed vigilante stabbing and pushing the abbot to his death. It has a monk selling cheese, wine, indulgences, and the second book of Poetics. It has a customer holding an indulgence, pointing up in shock as the abbot's about to crush him. And an exact replica of Martin Luther's 95 Theses. I hope you have a merry old 12-y, and I hope you'll forgive me for being really late this year. But if you don't, I made a spare just in case. Thank you for watching.